Welcome to this video supplement for engine wiring splice repair safety recall 14S17. This presentation will provide an overview of the engine wiring splice repair procedure. Safety recall 14S17 applies to certain 2013 and 2014 model year Focus ST and Escape vehicles equipped with a 2-liter engine. For vehicles included in Safety Recall 14S17, certain splices in the engine wiring harness may not be sufficiently crimped, resulting in the potential for high resistance in the engine sensor circuits. High resistance in these circuits may result in engine performance issues that can include illumination of the malfunction indicator lamp, reduced engine power, hesitation, running rough, or stall without warning. The procedures to repair the splices are similar between the Focus ST and Escape 2-liter engine models. This video will demonstrate the procedure for both vehicles and will also identify the minor differences between them. Be sure to follow the procedure for the vehicle you're working on that's provided in Safety Recall 14S17 technical information, including any procedures referenced in the workshop manual. For both vehicles, begin by disconnecting the battery ground cable. Also, remove the engine appearance cover. Remove the air cleaner assembly and air cleaner outlet tube. On Focus ST models, disconnect and position the air cleaner intake tube aside. Detach the tube retaining clip from the lower radiator hose and position the hose aside. Detach the retaining clips from the lower radiator hose and engine wire harness. And detach the engine wire harness pushpin retainer from the transmission. On Escape models, remove the lower radiator hose retaining clip, detach the pushpin retainers from the transmission, and position the lower radiator hose aside. Disconnect the 2 wire harness retainers at the front of the transmission. Disconnect the turbine shaft speed sensor connector, and disconnect the starter motor wire harness electrical connector. Finally, cut the upper wire harness retainer tie strap off of the harness and set it aside for use during reassembly. On both models, pull the engine wiring harness upward to provide better access for the repair. The splices to be repaired on 2-liter engine Escape models will be within this section of the harness, and within this section of the harness on the Focus ST. Use a commercially available sheathing ripper, such as Snap-on number SGTT4A or equivalent, to carefully open the wire harness tape in the splice area. Insert the ball end of the sheathing ripper into the harness, and be careful not to damage any wires or insulation during this process. On 2-liter Escape models, the splices requiring repair are splice number S182, which is a splice having 1 wire into 2 wires that are gray with a brown trace, and splice number S108, which has 2 wires into 4 wires that are yellow with a green trace. On Focus ST models, the splices requiring repair are splice number S133, which has 2 wires into 3 wires that are yellow with a violet trace, and S132, which is a splice having 1 wire into 4 wires that are yellow with a green trace. Note that there are several splices in this area of the harness, and some have similar wire colors to the splices needing repair. Be sure that you identify the correct splices as described before proceeding with the repair. To make the splice repairs, cut the wires on each end of the splice and remove the splice. Strip 3/4 of an inch or 19 millimeters of insulation off of the ends of the vehicle wires to be spliced. Prepare a splice wire using a 16-inch or 40-centimeter length of wire as identified in the Safety Recall 14S17 dealer bulletin for each of the splices. Strip 1.5 inches or 38 millimeters of insulation off of the ends of these wires. Position 2 lengths of ES1 double wall heat shrink tubing onto each splice wire. Line up the ends of the splice wire with the ends of the vehicle wires to be spliced together, and twist 1/2 inch or 13 millimeters of the ends of the wires together. Bend the splice wire at a 90-degree angle to the vehicle harness wires where they're twisted together. To solder the wires, preheat the soldering iron to bring it to full temperature. Using the appropriate lead-free solder as identified in the Safety Recall 14S17 dealer bulletin, tin the soldering iron by melting some solder onto the tip of the soldering iron. Place the tip of the soldering iron under the center of the twisted wires until the wires are hot enough to melt solder. Be careful not to overheat the wires or damage to the insulation may occur. Touch the solder to the top of the wires opposite from the soldering iron tip. As solder melts, it will flow into the strands of wire. Move the solder along the twisted wire as necessary to flow solder into the twisted length of wire. Once the solder cools, bend the splice wire parallel to the vehicle wire and slide one section of the heat shrink tubing over the splice so that it's centered over the solder joint. Use a suitable heat gun, such as Rotunda shielded flameless heat gun with heat deflector and shrink tubing attachment, to heat the tubing until it has shrunk and sealant comes out of both ends of the tubing. Repeat the wire stripping, twisting, soldering, and heat shrink steps at each of the locations to be repaired. Once all splice locations are repaired, bundle the excess splice wires into the existing harness by looping it neatly into the harness. Secure the wires with a few short lengths of wire harness tape, and then apply harness tape to the harness, starting from the bottom of the harness and working upward until all exposed wires are covered. Position the engine wire harness back into its original position. On Escape 2-liter engine models, install the upper wire harness retainer that was removed during disassembly using a new tie strap to secure the retainer to the harness. On all models, reassemble all remaining components in the reverse order of disassembly. Thank you for your time. Please be sure to refer to the dealer bulletin, technical information, and additional documents for Safety Recall 14S17 here on fmcdealer.com.